You've probably seen the video by now. A smartwatch that can read your blood sugar without needles, without sensors stuck to your skin, without pain. Just slap it on your wrist and boom, instant glucose numbers. Sounds like the future, right? I get why people want this so badly. If you've ever had to prick your finger or wear a sensor on your arm, you know it's annoying, sometimes painful, and definitely not cheap. So when a company claims they've solved all of that with a watch, it feels like a miracle waiting to happen. But here's the thing. In health tech, sounds amazing and actually works are two very different worlds. And that's exactly what I wanted to find out. So I ran a real test. Not just one reading, not just one day. I compared a so-called non-invasive glucose smartwatch against a traditional fingerstick meter and a continuous glucose sensor over multiple days, in real life. Not in a lab, not in perfect conditions. I checked my blood sugar when I woke up, before meals, after meals, during workouts, and even in the middle of the night. And at first, I'll be honest with you, it looked promising. The first reading lined up surprisingly well. My meter showed a number in the high 70s. My sensor was in the high 80s. The watch landed in the mid 70s. That's the kind of result that makes you think, wait a second, is this thing actually onto something? But one good reading doesn't mean anything. Your blood sugar isn't a statue. It's moving all the time. It goes up when you eat. It drops when you exercise. It can crash if you take too much insulin. It can spike if you eat something carb-heavy. So if a device is going to be useful, it needs to track those changes, not just give you a random number that looks reasonable. That's why I didn't make day one easy. Well, actually, I kind of did by accident. I kept my glucose pretty steady that day. No big spikes, no scary lows. And under those conditions, the watch looked fine. Not perfect, but close enough that I thought, okay, let's see what happens when things get messy. Before we get deeper into the results, it helps to understand how these three methods actually measure glucose, because they're not doing the same thing at all. A fingerstick meter is old school, but it's still the gold standard at home. You prick your finger, you get real blood, and the meter analyzes it directly. It's fast. It's relatively accurate. And almost every meter you buy in a pharmacy is FDA cleared. The downside is obvious. It hurts. The strips cost money, and you only get a snapshot. You don't see what happens before or after unless you test again. A continuous glucose sensor reading. Tomwite. Smartwatch stream. Sound once. Centimeter ye. It sits on your arm and has a tiny filament that goes just under the skin. It measures glucose in the fluid between your cells, not directly in your blood. That's why there can be a small delay when your sugar is rising or falling fast. But the big advantage is trends. You don't just see a number. You see where you're going, up, down, or steady. That kind of data is incredibly powerful, especially for people with diabetes. These sensors aren't cheap, but they are regulated. They go through accuracy testing. They're FDA cleared for medical use. Now, the smartwatch. This is where things get fuzzy. The watch has a sensor on the back that claims it can measure glucose through your skin. No needle, no filament, no blood. You press a button, wait about 10 seconds, and a number pops up. It even shows you a graph over the day, just like a real glucose sensor. And the price is tempting. You buy it once, maybe around $100, and there's no subscription, no refills, no strips. In theory, you could track your glucose forever for the price of a cheap phone. That's a powerful promise. But here's the uncomfortable part. No smartwatch on the market is currently authorized by the FDA to measure blood glucose. In fact, regulators have warned people not to rely on these devices for medical decisions, especially if you have diabetes. Now, I know some people don't trust the FDA. I get that. Agencies move slowly. Technology moves fast. But this isn't about politics. It's about physics and biology. Measuring glucose non-invasively is one of the hardest problems in medical technology. Researchers have been working on it for decades using lasers, light spectroscopy, radio waves, you name it. And so far, no consumer device has cracked it reliably. So when a random watch claims it has, you should raise an eyebrow, or both. By day 3 of testing, patterns started to show up. When my blood sugar stayed in a normal range, roughly between 70 and 140, the watch didn't look terrible. It was often within about 20% of the meter and the sensor. That's not great, but it's not completely useless either. If that was all I saw, I might have said, okay, maybe this is a rough estimate tool. But then I pushed it harder. After a high-carb meal, my blood sugar jumped close to 190. The meter said it. The sensor said it. The graph showed a sharp rise. But the watch? It barely moved. It stayed around the low 100s and never went above about 130. Think about that for a second. If you relied on that watch, you'd think your sugar was fine when it was actually pretty high. That's not just inaccurate. That's dangerous. And then came the low. This one really got me. I went for a walk and started feeling weak, shaky. You know that feeling when something is wrong? I checked my blood sugar with the meter and it was in the 40s. That's severe hypoglycemia. That's the kind of number where you don't argue with it. You treat it immediately. The sensor showed it too. It even showed the drop over the last half hour. But the watch? It still showed over 100. It never dipped below normal. According to the watch, I was fine. According to reality, I needed glucose right now. That's when the trust broke for me. Because missing a spike is bad, but missing a low can be life-threatening. And this wasn't a fluke. Over the next days, it became clear that whenever my glucose changed quickly, the watch just couldn't keep up. It seemed stuck in a comfortable middle zone, no matter what my body was actually doing. But what I noticed on day 5 was even stranger. I looked at the daily graphs from my real sensor. Each day looked different. Different meals, different exercise, different stress levels. That's how biology works. It's messy. Then I looked at the watch graphs, and they looked almost identical. Every night was flat. Every morning had a bump. Lunch had a bump. Dinner had a bump. Like a schedule, not like a body. It was too perfect. Almost like the watch wasn't measuring glucose at all, but guessing based on time of day. So I tested that idea. One morning, I skipped breakfast and went for a run. Normally, exercise makes my glucose go down. And sure enough, my sensor showed it dropping into the 80s. My fingerstick confirmed it. But the watch still showed the same morning spike it always showed, right on schedule. That's when it clicked for me. It felt less like a measurement and more like an algorithm pretending to be one. Now, to be fair, these watches often have other features. Step counting, heart rate, sleep tracking. If you're buying it for that, that's your call. But for glucose, the evidence just isn't there. And this is where we have to be honest about what science actually supports. Fingerstick meters and continuous glucose monitors have real validation behind them. They have error margins, yes, but those margins are studied. They're known. Smartwatches claiming non-invasive glucose measurement don't have that. Not yet. And this matters because people make decisions based on these numbers. They decide whether to eat, whether to inject insulin, whether to drive, whether to exercise. If the number is wrong, the decision is wrong. This isn't like a step counter being off by a few hundred steps. This is your metabolism. This is your safety. So what's the takeaway? The idea of painless, non-invasive glucose monitoring is exciting. I want it to exist. Everyone wants it to exist. Researchers are working on it, and one day it probably will exist. But right now, consumer smartwatches that claim to measure blood sugar without breaking the skin are not reliable. They may give you numbers that look reasonable. They may even match sometimes. But when it matters most, during spikes and crashes, they fall apart. If you want accurate readings today, your best options are still the boring ones. Fingerstick meters for spot checks, continuous glucose sensors for trends. And yes, they cost money. And yes, they're inconvenient. But they're based on actual biology, not guesses. And here's something else people don't talk about enough. Even real meters can give you false readings if you don't use them correctly. Dirty hands, old strips, bad technique. All of that can mess with your results. So accuracy isn't just about the device. It's about how you use it. Look, I didn't test this watch to make money. In fact, reviewing something like this usually burns bridges with companies. But I'd rather save you money than make it. If you're living with diabetes or you care about your blood sugar, you deserve tools that work, not gadgets that look cool and lie to you. So if this changed how you think about glucose tech, do me a favor and hit subscribe. I break down health science like this every week, without the hype and without the miracle nonsense. Real research, real experience, and real talk. And if you want to learn how to measure your blood sugar properly and avoid the biggest mistakes people make, check out the next video. It might save you more than just a few bucks.